Hi, welcome back to another monthly reads video. This one is a bit late, but I'm very excited to talk about the books I read in July because there were a lot, because two of them were audiobooks, and I will leave my previous monthly reads videos in the description box, and you can also see my mid-year reading freakout tag here. In July, I read 7 books, I believe. The first one was Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Machado. So Her Body and Other Parties is a collection of short stories. It's very feminist, but it's different than other sort of women's fiction. It is very subversive and original. Very, very interesting. You could see that there was a lot of experimentation, and you can just tell that Carmen Machado is a writer. You can just see it in the essence of her writing. The short stories are as titled: The Husband Stitch, Inventory, Mothers, Especially Hyenas, Real Women Have Bodies, 8 Bites, The Resident, and Difficult at Parties. I gave this book 4 stars. Oh, by the way, I'm looking at my book journal because I recently started doing that, and it's really been helping me just remember what I read. There are big triggers in this book, so I would really encourage you to check them out before you decide to read it. Unlike me, who just often jumps into books and then gets triggered, and then it ruins a few days of my life. It talks about body image, anxiety, and mental health, or possibly just psychosis. So The Husband Stitch is the story about a woman who has a green ribbon on her neck, and it never mentions what a husband stitch is explicitly, but it's something that people do to women after they give birth so that it'll feel better during sex. For the man. Like, it's never for the woman's benefit at all. From what I have heard, it's actually very painful, and they either never really ask you or always just do it without your consent. It makes me very angry. I like that the writing is sensual. There's sensual sex, and there's also a lot of bad sex, which is realistic. I really like the symbolism in this short story. And then Inventory, it started out with a lot of snippets of the protagonist's past sexual encounters. Like, literally, it's like a list of vignettes of that, and I did really like some of them. But then you see that the story is about a plague spreading across, was it just America or the world? I think it was the world. So she has to keep moving as the plague spreads, and then, yeah, that was a bit uncanny to read about a plague because we are living in one right now. This was written in 2017, but I just thought it was very uncanny. And the third short story was called Mothers, and it was about being a mother and what society expects of women when they are becoming mothers, or just motherhood in general. And it talks about it in a way that is very realistic. Like, it's not afraid to put itself out there and not afraid to be seen as being a bad mother, just because you don't see it as something beautiful. some of the time or all of the time. And that's something I really like to see, because I feel like society always is just like, you're a woman, so you're gonna love being a mother, and it's beautiful, and if you don't want to be one now, you will change your mind, and it will just be the most beautiful moment of your life. So I did really like seeing the way it was talked about in mothers. And then there was especially Hyenas, and this one was my least favorite short story in the book, because there was a lot of mentions of sexual assault, and it was very triggering for me to read. I almost like wanted to skip it, but I didn't, because it wasn't just about that. Obviously there were very interesting things in it. It was like magical realism. Actually, I think this book could be considered magical realism as well. Do keep that in mind, and please check the trigger warnings. And then Real Women Have Bodies was one of my favorites in the book. I love the symbolism, and it's about this protagonist who works in a dress shop and falls in love with the store owner's daughter. It was very sensually written. And in the book, in the short story, there's this disease that is kind of taking over women only, where they start to disappear. Top tier symbolism right there. I kind of interpreted as how trauma happens to women, and then people dismiss it and gaslight it and think it's not real, or you're just being sensitive because you're a woman. I really like the quote, "Women, like the one in the viral video, see-through and glowing faintly, like afterthoughts." I just love that. I'm not going to go too much in detail about what happens, because I think you should read it for yourself. But I also just thought, like, people in that world would say, I don't trust anything that can be incorporeal and isn't dead. Or they can't trust the fated women who can't be touched but can stand on the earth, as if we exist just to be touched, to be commented on, to be regulated, to be controlled. So yeah, really love that. It was actually really sad. I almost cried. It was a longer book where we got to spend more time with the characters and just explore them in more emotional depth, I would have cried. And then 8 Bites was a short story about a woman who has an eating disorder, and so do her sisters, because of their mother, who was sort of abusive in that way. And it was about wanting to change into what society wants you to be as a woman. And then The Resident is my favorite story in this book. I give it 5 stars because I also ranked each short story. So this one is about a writer who goes to a residency in the mountains in a place called Devil's Throat, which used to be called Angel's Mouth. And the whole story became sort of like a fever dream, because she gets sick and you don't really know what's real or not real anymore as the story goes on. I really like that aspect of it, and everybody thought she was crazy and weird because she was an introvert who had a lot of anxiety, and she was a writer, and I just love seeing stories about a woman being a writer and being super anxious. So that's why I also really liked Writers and Lovers as well. I think if you don't want to read this book, or you found the trigger warnings triggering, you should just read this book, read this story on its own, because it was very interesting. And then Difficult at Parties was another one of my favorites, and maybe even more deranged than the last one. It was about a protagonist who had some sort of car accident or sexual abuse accident. I'm actually not really sure, but I saw something in the reviews about it. I assumed it was a car accident. But she watches these DVD porn rentals and with the sound off, but she's able to hear their thoughts. And it's also about a relationship falling apart, so that part was really sad as well. But I did think this book was just very interesting after all. Overall, I mean. Okay, and the second book I read was Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. It's the first book in a duology. It's YA, and earlier this year I read the Shadow and Bone trilogy, and I did not like it at all. And if you know a lot about it, you know why. And I wasn't going to read this duology, but a lot of people said that it is a big jump in quality in the writing and character development and stuff like that. And that is very true because I gave it 4 stars. And it was just so inspiring, like even just beyond the story, to see a writer improve so much. Like you can just visibly see it. So yeah, that's very inspiring to me as someone who is trying to write their first short story since they were a kid. To be honest, it did take me a while to get into the book. I think because, like Ninth House, which was the first Leigh Bardugo book I ever read, it just kind of throws you into this world or story and things are happening right from the start. But once I was into it, boy was I. Just love how diverse Bardugo's writing is, like both in race, ethnicity, and sexual orientation. So I like that. This was just about, like, these are criminals, these are street thugs in a fictional world called the Grishaverse, and there's a big heist for them to perform. So it is very plot driven, but it's also very character driven. So if you like that, you should check out Six of Crows. Then I read The Lost Daughter on my Audible free trial. It was really good. I think ever since I started the Neapolitan series earlier this year, this was the one I really wanted to get to because it just intrigued me so much. Like I said earlier about mothers in the first book, like I just really like seeing subversive narratives about motherhood. That's not like what people usually tell you about motherhood. So I just really like to see that just for that. Not much really happens in the book, but I just love the female rage and kind of slow spiraling vibe. There's the hardships of motherhood and the way Ferrante explores the complexities of motherhood. I just loved it. Basically, this is a female rage book, which, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you heard that and went to read it right away. The next book I read in July was Convenience Store Woman, also on Audible. It's by Sayaka Murata. And I thought the audiobook narrator did an amazing job too. Like, she fit the character perfectly. It was very interesting and enjoyable. I was just definitely surprised. I give it 4 stars, and I would recommend this to anyone who has ever felt like an outsider in this world. So in this book we follow Kaiko, who has been considered weird since childhood. And I noticed very early on, like from the beginning, that she exhibits signs of being on the neurodivergent spectrum. And this is never explicitly mentioned in the book. Like, I don't think the character herself knows this as well, because throughout the book, like, she keeps mentioning stuff about her family saying she needs to be fixed or cured, or else she will never be normal. And I found that really sad, because if somebody is neurodivergent, they have the right to know, and they should know, to know why they're like that. But I think Kaiko really doesn't know, and that is very sad to me. But throughout her life, she has felt as though she must mimic what other people do to not get in trouble or be considered weird. And she has always felt like that until she starts working at a convenience store at age 18, which is when she feels like she belongs, because during her training she's told how to behave, what to do, and like smiling to customers and what to say to customers when they ask you something. So it's kind of her, I guess, guidance manual to being a part of society, as she says, and being normal in the world. And now she's 36 years old, so she's been working at a convenience store for 18 years now. And people are asking her, when are you getting married? Are you going to have children? And it's just stuff like that that's just like infuriating to me, the way other people treat her, because she's a 36-year-old single woman in Japan. At one point she pretends to be in a relationship with this other man who does have the same ideals as her, except he is sexist and misogynistic and just very rude in general. Like, he annoyed me so much I wanted to punch him. But other than that, like I said, if you've ever felt like an outsider in our society, I think you would love Convenience Store Woman. And I deeply, deeply resonated with Murata's commentary on how society or normal people act. Then I read My Sister the Serial Killer, also on audiobook. This is by Oyinkan Braithwaite, and unfortunately this was only a 2.5-star read for me. It's about a woman in Nigeria who is a nurse, and her sister has this unusual habit of murdering the men she is with, because she clearly has some issues of her own. And I don't know, I just felt like there was something missing from the book for me. Maybe it was because of the audiobook narrator. I felt like I didn't like the narration that much. Honestly, I felt like this book was somewhat underwhelming for me. I was expecting more. Obviously, there is a big social commentary on how women are treated in Nigeria. But I don't know. There was just something missing for me. But I definitely do see why people enjoy this book and think it's so cool. Like, it's another unhinged woman kind of vibe, which I do love. So this was just my opinion. No hate if you loved it. And then I read Crooked Kingdom, which is the second book in the duology after Six of Crows. Of course, this is by Leigh Bardugo, and I gave it 4 stars. Again, I liked it a lot, and it follows immediately after the events of the first book, the heist and things that go wrong. Again, it was just so amazing to see the characters and how they grew and changed throughout their arc in just 2 books. So I thought that was really cool. We got to get to know the characters more, and they're just so cute, like the couples. And I also love how homophobia isn't a thing in the Grishaverse. Like, it just doesn't exist. Or maybe it's just for these characters in general, but I just thought that was something nice to see, because it's just so rare to have LGBT characters and be like, this is normal, this is just, like, there's no external conflict about that. So I really like to see that. And the last book I read in July was The Picture of Dorian Gray. The copy I have is The Picture of Dorian Gray and his other writings, which is why the tabs only go up until here. I did 2 videos already, 2 ASMR videos. One is explaining my annotations, and the other one is me reading and annotating the book. And last night I just filmed a part 2 of the annotation explanations. I might be writing a blog post about this, so I'm not going to go too in depth, and this is a classic as well, so I'm sure you already know about this, but if you don't, it is about this man, Dorian Gray, who sells his soul to remain youthful forever. And if that doesn't intrigue you already, I don't know what would, because this is one of my favorite books of all time. There's just so much cadence and hedonism and homoeroticism. Unfortunately, this is a censored version of the book. If you don't know, Oscar Wilde did spend some time imprisoned because of his homosexuality. I only found out a few years ago that there was an uncensored version of it, so I definitely want to seek that out and read it one day. If the themes I mentioned are things that intrigue you, I implore you to read this, because I think you will love it. And if you do, or if you are intrigued but feel intimidated by the fact that this is a classic, you might want to check out my ASMR English lit video where I explain my annotations to hopefully make it easier for you. Okay, that is it for what I read in July. I hope you enjoyed listening to me talk about books and found some new recommendations. If you have recommendations for me based on what I read this month, I will love to see them in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.